After posting my video about my 1-month left-handed drumming experiment, I've been getting a lot of questions from people wondering whether it would be worth it for them to invest in learning how to play open-handed or to switch their kits backwards for a given period of time. So in this video, I want to take a look at some of the trade-offs, the various pros and cons of different approaches, and give my best estimations for how long it's going to take you to learn any one of these approaches. Now, there's a lot of ways we could take this video. I've gotten questions from right-handed drummers who are interested in switching to playing open-handed. I've gotten questions from left-handed drummers who are just starting out and wondering whether they should play on a right-handed drum set for practical reasons. But the overarching theme here is it worth it? And this is a question that I've pondered a lot myself, and that's what I want to address here. So for something to be worth something, that implies that there's a value exchange happening there. It's a sort of transaction. And in this case, we're exchanging our time and effort in the practice room for some sort of, hopefully, musical benefit at the end of the road. So my intention with this video is to, as clearly as possible, lay out the benefits of various approaches, as well as my best estimations for the cost of those. And then you can make your own decision based on what you want to do. So in the big picture, I'd say we have three main categories of approaches to look at. You have sort of the standard approach that most of us have been taught, which is to cross over our hands and we play predominantly with one side, either fully righty or fully lefty. The second category would be what we call open-handed drumming, which just means simply not crossing over to play the hi-hat and not really crossing over in general. Instead, you hit the stuff on the left side with the left hand and the stuff on the right side with the right hand, and you have this open position with the hands. Now, within this category, there's a few different flavors of open-handed drumming. There are those, for example, that always lead with the left hand, but still play on a right-handed kit. So many left-handed drummers that I know play this way, where they still play on a right-handed drum set. Their feet are righty, but they play their hi-hat with the left hand, and they also have the ride cymbal on the left hand. The second flavor of this would be to switch sides. And this is more the category that I fall into of what I would like to do. And that is to still play on a standard right-handed drum set, but be able to switch both sides. So I play the left hand on the hi-hat, and I play the ride cymbal with the right hand, and I like to be able to switch back and forth. And then I suppose the third flavor of open-handed drumming would be something more like what Harry Meary does and talks about in his video about open-handed drumming. And that's where you actually move the kit parts around to fit the way that you already play. He has a cable hi-hat and a double bass drum pedal, and he plays essentially right-handed on a left-handed drum set. The third and final category would be complete ambidexterity, where you're switching not only the hands, but also the feet. So you're playing fully righty and fully lefty on the same kit and switching back and forth between them. So first, let's talk about this. Why would we ever do this? Why would we ever cross our hands over to play something on this side of the drums with this hand? It makes no sense at all. The only reason you would ever do this, well, actually, I can think of two. The first reason is not a good reason, and that is that that's how everybody has always done it before us. There's a lot of problems with this approach. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can definitely get used to it, as most of us have, but try switching your drums lefty for a month and see what it actually feels like to do that as a beginner. It's extremely awkward, and I really never really got used to it over my month-long challenge. Now, the actual benefit of this approach, in theory, is that you can use the same vocabulary from your ride cymbal and move that over to your hi-hat. And you have to remember that when the drum set was invented, there actually was no hi-hat, so there wasn't even anything to cross over to. The original drum sets had, just a ride cymbal, kick, snare, and the hi-hat came later. So actually the first hi-hats were something called the Charleston pedal, and then that developed into something called the lowboy. And then when you took the lowboy and put it up high, that was your hi-hat. But anyway, my point being, the original drummers would have developed their vocabulary in the absence of a hi-hat pedal. And then once that was introduced, it does make sense that you would want to take this vocabulary from your, ride and snare coordination, and you'd want to be able to move that over onto the hi-hat, and that way you don't have to practice anything extra to play on this sound source. That's probably the best argument for why you should cross over, is that you can keep all the same coordination and vocabulary, and you don't have to practice anything extra to play all these different sound sources, which does make sense on the surface, but it does come with the disadvantages of less dynamic control. It's much harder to play a loud note on the snare with a quiet note on the hi-hat, which is a really important skill to have, by the way, because most drummers play their hi-hat way too loud, and once you hear that recorded, you'll notice that you really need to play the hi-hat very softly and the snare drum quite loud to get a good balanced sound. So you have that disadvantage, you have the potential to click your sticks accidentally, and it's awkward to reach around and play the toms while you're playing the hi-hat. But the other assumption here is that it's going to take too much work to play with a more practical approach that makes more sense, like open-handed drumming, which may not be the case depending on the situation. Now let's look at open-handed drumming. To me, this feels like a much more natural approach and a much more intuitive thing to do. I think if you sat somebody down on a drum set for the first time that maybe grew up in a cave and had never seen the drums before, they would instinctively play the stuff on the left side, including the hi-hat, with the left hand. There's no reason they would cross over unless they saw somebody already doing that before them. So open-handed drumming has that going for it. It's much more natural in a way, and it's much more comfortable. That's a definite direct benefit. So you've got increased freedom of motion. It just feels good to play like this, and you've got increased dynamic control, which, as I mentioned before, is a really, really huge advantage. So you're gonna get all of those benefits even at the base level, even if you don't want to switch sides. Now, if you do want to switch sides, which is what I would like to do, still play on a standard drum set, but switch left and righty lead with the hands, then you get some extra benefits, which is that you're more likely to have equal physical ability with both of your hands, which is a big plus, right? And you get the added benefit of additional coordination. If you learn how to play things two different ways, then you've got more musical options. And then finally, you've got the fully ambidextrous approach if you want to go all the way with this thing. And that's where you switch the feet as well. That just gives you even more musical options. And perhaps most importantly, it gives your left foot a lot more to do if you're going to be playing the kick drum with that. And I do think that the left foot for most drummers is the most underdeveloped limb. So there is a huge advantage to giving that left foot something to do. This can also give you the option to have more sound colors to play with. Like you look at somebody like Mike Mangini or Travis Orban, they've got a mirror image drum set and you have more sound options to choose from. Or you might stagger your toms like Mangini, and then you can play a certain kind of melody that you can't do in the same way using the same stickings on another drum set. And so there are absolutely musical benefits to having that extra skill beyond just having extra technique for the sake of technique. So now you might be saying, wow, this sounds great, Shawn. I love the sound of these benefits. Sign me up. I just have one question though. How much is it gonna cost? And that is the million-dollar question. Well, maybe not million-dollar, but it's an expensive question nonetheless. So it seems to me that the cost is the key part of this equation in our cost-benefit analysis, because I think the benefits are rather obvious. If the cost were the same for all of these approaches, I think there's no reason you wouldn't choose the maxed out fully ambidextrous one just to have the extra firepower, so to speak. But of course, the cost is not the same. So if it's gonna take you an extra, 23 years of your life to achieve this, most people will probably say, nah, I don't really need those extra skills. I'm pretty happy with this awkward crossing over. However, if it's just like 10% more time, okay, now I think a lot more people would be interested. So knowing the true cost of this in terms of hours spent in the practice room is really the key to this whole equation for figuring out whether or not it's gonna be worth it to you to take any of these approaches. So for the rest of the video, I will give my best estimations for what the cost of these various things are. And I want you to take all of this with a huge grain of salt, because this is extremely difficult to know what the true cost of any of this is. The main reason for that is we don't have enough data. You would have to do a massive study with hundreds of drummers over multiple years to really compare fairly how much work it takes to do, to play fully righty versus fully lefty versus open-handed versus ambidextrous, and compare all of those in a clinical environment. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of data, so it's going to be nearly impossible for us to do this really in a scientific way, the way that I would like to. So in the absence of a large data set, the next best thing we have is the stories of people that have done similar things before. So that's a very small data set, but it's better than nothing. So the first thing that seems to be true is that it doesn't matter whether you're a righty or lefty in the rest of your life. Like if you write things with your right hand, that has very little to do with whether you're gonna be better at being a righty drummer or not. And the reason is that drumming is such a specialized skill that requires so many thousands of hours to develop that a little bit of advantage from throwing a football or something is not really going to help you in your drumming. I know many left-handed people in their daily lives that decided for practical reasons to play the drums right-handed, and it didn't take them any longer to achieve that. And I do think there are some convincing arguments for playing on a right-handed drum set, regardless of whether you're righty or lefty. And I want to be careful with how I word this, because I imagine that left-handed people are kind of marginalized, and they're probably tired of hearing people like me who are right-handed telling them to do things right-handed. But I would just say, first of all, I'm not telling anybody what to do, and I think you should do what's best for you. But I do want to give you as much information as I can so you can make a good decision. And from my point of view, here's the advantage to playing on a right-handed drum set. You can sit down at any drum set anywhere in the world, if it's a standard drum set, and play. So going to a jam session, easy. Going to a studio where the engineer is used to miking things in a certain way, they might have the mics already kind of pre-staged for a right-handed setup. If you're sharing a kit at a gig, you don't have to switch things around. If you live in New York City, please, dear God, play on a right-handed drum set, because every club and venue has their own drum set, and most of the time there's a million different bands playing on the same night, and you've only got 5 minutes to switch everything, to swap your cymbals, adjust your seat height, and then go. Now, if you've got your own kit all the time and you're always driving to the gig and setting up your drums, then you can do whatever's comfortable for you. You can bring all your own gear, you can bring cable hi-hats, you can do whatever you need to do. But if you do want to share kits or just be able to play on any kit that's not your own, which happens a lot as a professional, then I do think it's really practical to play the standard kind of drum set, just like it's practical to play a standard right-handed guitar. And keep in mind, this is speaking mainly to those who have just started or haven't been playing the drums for very long, because, you know, if you're this early in your journey, then you can take any path you want, and it's going to take you about the same amount of time, you know, to become a righty or a lefty. So whatever hand you use to, I don't know, brush your teeth or open doors has almost no effect on your ability to play the drums in the grand scheme of, say, 10 years of practicing. Even in 1 year of practicing, I mean, maybe it would give you an advantage for the first few weeks, or I don't know, 1 or 2 months. But after that, I really don't see there being a huge advantage to favoring one side over another based on what you do in the rest of your life. So I don't think that should be a major factor in your decision. And keep in mind that whether you're a righty or a lefty, you still need to play well with both hands. You have to have good technique and play in time with both hands. So like if I play a groove, I can't just like have a horrible left hand. I mean, my right hand's a little bit better, but I can't get away with a huge disparity in ability. Otherwise, it throws the whole groove off. So you do have to have some skill with both sides. And since it's going to take you the same amount of time from being a beginner to becoming a proficient lefty or righty drummer, then I don't think it really matters which one you choose. Now, here's some food for thought for righties and lefties alike, is that since crossing over is awkward and stupid, in my opinion, then I think it actually might make more sense to just play open-handed, leading with the left all the time. And that way you can still sit down on a normal right-handed drum set, and all you gotta do is move your ride cymbal over to the left side, which I think is a pretty good compromise. You don't have to do any extra work to lead with multiple sides, and all you have to do to change your kit is like move one cymbal over to the other side. Now, we've spoken a lot about beginners, but where this situation changes is for those of us that have been playing for a long time. And this is where it actually does take a significant amount of time to switch sides. It's much easier as a beginner with a blank slate to form new habits than it is for us, you know, old dogs to learn new tricks, so to speak. And so in this case, my prior experience actually interferes with my ability to learn a new skill. Whereas if I had started switching from the very beginning, it wouldn't have taken as much time. I actually know a handful of drum teachers who started teaching their students to play open-handed from the very beginning. And these students pick it up very quickly. Once they are used to switching things, that becomes, you know, not such a big deal. And so it doesn't take them that much more time to learn the mirror image of a certain pattern. It's like, I feel like I'm in a similar place with say like snare drum kind of stuff, because I spent a lot of time in my youth doing, you know, rudiments and playing things off the right and the left sides. And so now I don't really feel a huge difference if I have to play something based on rudiments starting with the left side. Now I do notice it when I'm playing grooves and I'm playing fills. Like if I'm playing on one drum, it's not a big deal, but if I have to spread things out or play fills backwards, I can't do that. I don't have the vocabulary for that. And grooves, I'm much more limited. I'm limited to what I practice, and it takes me a little more time to learn how to switch sides on a groove because I'm not used to doing that as much as I am, switching rudiments. So that's a case where your prior experience actually gets in the way and makes it harder for you to learn than a beginner who has no drum experience. However, there are areas of skill that do transfer over and that do actually save you time. So that kind of works to cancel out some of that. For instance, during my lefty challenge this last month, I already had been playing drums for forever. And so I already knew the kinds of things that I wanted to play. And so I didn't have to invent a new vocabulary. I simply had to learn how to execute the vocabulary I already had in my head. A lot of other things transfer, like my hand technique, my timing, my musical sensibilities, what I would like to play where and when. Now, I think the hardest thing you can do is to completely switch and learn how to play lefty if you've been a righty your whole life. And so I think switching the feet is an enormous challenge, and it's significantly more difficult than just switching the hands. We use our left foot so little. Even in jazz, where it's perhaps more active than in other styles, playing different rhythms, it's still not something that we use a whole lot. And so it takes a lot of time to get used to playing the kick drum with the left foot and having the same kind of abilities. I feel like my hands are more or less physically equal. Like, I don't have all the same coordination patterns on the left side, but in terms of actual speed and power and precision, my left hand is pretty much the same as my right, and it's been like that since I was like 18 years old because I focused on that. But my left foot is another story. The right foot is so much better than the left foot, and I know that it's going to take me years to get my left foot caught up to the right. So probably the most well-known example of an ambidextrous drummer is Mike Mangini, and he has said in interviews that it took him 6 years to get comfortable playing a gig on a left-handed drum set. 6 years is a long time, and not everyone's going to be willing to put in that much work. But if we step back and look at the larger picture of Mike's career, and I don't know exactly how long Mike had been playing before he started playing lefty, but if we consider he was playing for perhaps 20 years before that point, he started at a very early age, 6 years is 30% of the time it took him, to get to where he was playing righty. Now, that's a best case scenario. I would assume that Mike was comfortable playing gigs righty much earlier than that. Let's cut that in half. Let's suppose he was comfortable playing gigs righty after 10 years. This is closer to a worst case scenario where it takes you 60% of the time to learn to play lefty. Now, the absolute worst scenario would be that it takes you the same amount of time to play lefty, but I highly, highly doubt that that's going to be the case. I mean, based on all my experience, all of those that I've talked to, the teachers I've taken lessons with, it seems to me that you are going to learn to play the second way faster than it took you to play the first way. But the question is just how much. I do not believe that if it takes you 10 years to play righty, it's going to take you 10 years to play lefty, because a lot of those skills will transfer over. I would put the cost of becoming ambidextrous on the drums somewhere roughly between 30 to 60% of the original work you did. And to be safe, let's say 50%. Now, becoming ambidextrous is the most difficult scenario. If you only want to switch the hands, like me, actually, I don't really care about switching the feet, other than I do kind of want my left foot to be better for double bass playing, but I don't do a whole lot of double bass playing. So for me, it's much more important to only switch the hands, and that's going to be significantly less work. Now, if you're a complete beginner, you're in luck, because all of this stuff becomes much easier if you start doing it this way from the very beginning. So I would say if you want to not switch your feet, but if you want to switch your hands to play lefty and righty, that is not going to take you that much extra time. I mean, yes, you do have to actually spend the time literally to practice the coordination patterns with the other side, but conceptually, once you get used to the idea of switching, the act of switching itself becomes much easier and takes much less time to do. If I had to bet, I would say that if you're a beginner and you want to learn how to play open-handed, leading with both sides and being able to switch, it's only going to take you maybe 5 to 10% extra work. I really don't believe that it's a huge commitment. I know, like I said before, I know teachers who have begun teaching their students to play open-handed from the very beginning, and they pick it up very quickly. It's only difficult when you've been playing a certain way to change your habits. So to recap, based on everything I've learned, everything I've practiced, and everyone I've spoken to, I would estimate that for a beginner to learn how to play righty or lefty would take the same amount of time, regardless of whether you're righty or lefty. I also think if you're a beginner and you start to play say, lefty open-handed on a right-handed drum set, that's also going to take the same amount of time. If you're a beginner and you want to become completely ambidextrous from the very beginning, it's going to be easier for you now to do that than later. It's still going to be more work than switching just the hands. Now, for those of us that have been playing for a while, I think to switch only the hands is going to take, again, probably 30% more work, maybe a little bit more. And if you want to switch all of the feet and everything, that's going to be more like 50 or 60% extra work. So those are the best estimations I can give. Those are my current beliefs, and obviously they're based on limited data. So I would very willingly change my opinion if I saw some convincing data that proved me wrong. And I would love to do these studies, by the way. But knowing what I know now, these are the best guesses I can give. And I think that the numbers are going to be roughly in these ranges. And I hope that this helps you make your own decisions. I want to thank my patrons for helping to make this video. We're having a lot of fun over there. So if you haven't checked it out, there is a special going till the end of the month. So I want to thank you for watching. If you do have more specific questions, head on over to my Patreon. We can chat about this in my Discord server or in one of my monthly Q&As for patrons only. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope that one day we can be a bit more scientific about it. And I hope that by having the costs and benefits a little bit more clearly laid out, you can better make your own decision on this stuff. So thank you guys for your support. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.